There's a lot to feel great about being Australian, like our spirit of mateship and making the most of the many opportunities we're given. We're known for our courage and resilience and our passion. Most importantly, we believe in the idea of a fair go. Not just having one, but also giving one in return. We are vibrant and distinct as one of the most diverse societies in the world. While our stories may begin in different places, we're bonded by a common future we will create together. So look around. It's easy to find inspiration to participate in your Australian citizenship. That means getting out there, being part of the community, and helping to create a sense of belonging. When every single one of us are just that little bit inspired to get involved, together as Australians, we can be truly inspiring.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another of our Inspiring Australians Lunch with Leaders events. I'm Anne-Marie Farley, General Manager of Programs here at AusBio, Australia Day Council WA, and I'll be facilitating today's session. We have more than 300 joining from around the country, including our wonderful guest speakers. I'm here on Whadjuk Noongar country, and I acknowledge the traditional custodians, pay my respects to elders past and present, and extend that to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here joining us today. I'll ask Dr. Richard Walley if he will now officially welcome us. Thank you, Richard.
Kaya wanju ngala jerp jinan nunak wangin bo bura mama jinan ngala wangin nunak yay kaya. Because we're from all over the place here, may the good spirit guide us through this presentation and keep us all safe. Kaiwa.
Thank you, Richard, for being so warm with your welcome. And we'll hear a lot from you later. So just some quick housekeeping. We're going to mute everybody's microphones. So if you do need to contact us at any time during the presentation, please use the chat function located at the bottom of your screen. Type your chats in there, questions. We also recommend that since we've had over 300 coming in, joining us today, once we start, perhaps if you could turn off your cameras so that we can keep some juice in the bandwidth to make sure that we all get the best from today's experience. We're here today in recognition of NAIDOC Week 2021 with a national theme of Hill Country, and we're extremely proud to have our WA Australian of the Year, Professor Helen Milroy, and WA Senior Australian of the Year, Dr. Richard Walley, with us in conversation. A little bit about our speakers today. Professor Helen Milroy is a pioneering Aboriginal psychiatrist, researcher and mental health champion, well known and highly respected across Australia. She's a descendant of the Paliku people of the Pilbara region, studying medicine before becoming the first Aboriginal Australian medical doctor. Helen worked as a GP and forensic medical officer before retraining as a psychiatrist, so she could better address the trauma and mental health issues she was seeing in so many children and young people. Among so many other incredible roles, Helen is also a published author and is currently shortlisted for the second time for Premier's Book Award for a children's book, Willy Wagtail, Tales from the Bush Mob. And we've got our fingers crossed for that for Helen. So please welcome Professor Helen Milroy, Western Australia's 2021 Australian of the Year. Also with us today is Dr. Richard Walley, OAM. Richard guides people and organisations on their journey of reconciliation through cultural awareness. He's a Noongar elder, one of Australia's leading Aboriginal performers, musicians and writers, who's been a campaigner for Indigenous causes over his lifetime. A champion of Whadjuk and Noongar people, Richard shares his profound knowledge of language, cultural practices and historical injustices, cultivating a deeper respect and recognition of Aboriginal culture. Richard reinvigorated the practice of modern day Welcome to Country ritual in Noongar country, a ceremony that's now commonplace across Australia, and he's received numerous honours, including a Order of Australia, an honorary doctorate and a WA Citizen of the Year. And he's a legendary basketballer and back in training, I believe. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Richard Walley, welcome Western Australia's 2021 Senior Australian of the Year. And for those who haven't seen it, here's a few moments from when Richard and Helen were announced as the 2021 WA Australian and Senior Australian of the Year.
What message you would like to take with you as our nominee for the Senior Australian of the Year?
My message is Australia is a very decent place, full of very decent people. And we, as 3% of this population, we appeal to your common decency. And that decency is a fantastic thing. And you can't ask for anything else more than respect and decency.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Richard Walley is our Senior West Australian of the Year.
I'll leave you with something from a painting that I did. And that is that from an Aboriginal perspective, children are a gift. They are born from a country and our culture that's as enduring as the universe. And we are all connected for eternity through love, life and spirit. So let's stand up for the kids and we'll have a bright future.
Ladies and gentlemen, Helen Milroy.
They're great. That was a great evening to be there, and we were so proud to have them both awarded on that day and recognised in some small way for the lifetime of work that they both contributed to our community. Now, just as we intro going into this conversation today, as a migrant myself, and I'm sure there's many others online today, I looked up a bit about the history of NAIDOC and found that it originated from the Day of Mourning, which was held on the Sunday before Australia Day. That's where it started. In 1955, it was shifted to the first Sunday in July, after it was decided that it should become not simply a protest day, but also a celebration of Aboriginal culture. And it was also proposed that it become a public holiday. After several changes to the acknowledgement and management of NAIDOC Day, by 1991, with greater awareness and importance afforded the day, it was agreed to extend this to become NAIDOC Week. Each year, the awareness appears to grow and our nation embraces it more. And today is testament to that. Just as a little bit of background, these sessions that we hold online, we would normally get around 100 people, and today's uptake has tripled that. So we're all showing that support and that we're embracing NAIDOC Week more and more. But we hope that it leads to action, and maybe we can even get Helen and Richard to do something about that public holiday that was touted at the beginning. So as we begin this conversation now, acknowledging that Heal Country is the theme for this NAIDOC Week. Helen, I'll speak first to you. You mentioned in that short introductory video and your acceptance speech the importance of children and what a gift they are to us all and to our future. And you shared a beautiful piece of your own artwork with me earlier this week entitled Mother Earth, Birthing the Nation, and supplied a wonderful article explaining that. We'll put that image up on screen and share that for everybody to see now. And could you please share that story and those beautiful words that support it, the artwork with us? And I think it really supports the Heal Country theme so beautifully and will certainly help us lead into today's conversation. Thanks, Helen.
Thank you, Anne-Marie, and hello to everyone. Also just acknowledge the traditional owners on all of the lands on which we meet today. I'm very, very fortunate to be in Whadjuk Noongar Boodja, and I absolutely love it here. So I'm very grateful to the traditional owners and their elders, past, present and emerging, for taking such good care of this beautiful country in which we get to live and work and bring up our children. So one of my ways of understanding life and health and the way we go about things was to go back and relearn everything that I learned in medicine and psychiatry through a cultural lens. And this was one of the things that I did. I thought about the importance of Mother Earth and what that meant, and hence this picture, because it's so important for our children to have this connection to country and be part of this ecological model that we live within. So this painting is called Mother Earth, Birthing the Nation. Sometime before the dreaming, the universe wanted new life and created Earth with everything that was needed to sustain and nurture creation. Everything that was put into the earth was good, and everything was given as gifts from the stars. The promise of the universe was fulfilled. Birth could now exist for eternity, and the universe could revolve in perpetual celebration as old life passes on and new life is created. As the earth was born, the universe nurtured the new life with tenderness and contentment, knowing what could become of the future. The earth grew and developed with the forests and plains, the mountains and valleys, the oceans and rivers, and every living creature, mothering all new creation. Finally, the two sides of the universe met together in a kiss, creating the cradle of mankind. The Creator's breath fell from the outer heavens, filling the cradle with spirit feathers to cushion the soul. The two serpents guarding the eternal flame awoke, allowing the heartbeat to be set alight in motion, then returned to their slumber. The great ocean spirit held up its tail to lift the cradle from the waters of life, letting the first breath be taken. The tree spirits gently rocked the cradle, setting forth the rhythm of life. Mother Earth gives forth her spirit in joyous splendor as each new life takes its first breath and awakens the world with its cry. As Mother Earth nurtured mankind, in turn, mankind accepted their custodianship of country and learnt to maintain the balance of life. Mother Earth continues to give birth to mankind through women on country, establishing the rightful place for our nations. A nation does not exist without the earth on which to lay the foundations. The bonds created when one is born of country, in country, are very strong indeed, as it should be. Mother Earth waits patiently for her children to return, as only they are the link that binds across time from the ancient to the new world. I think having that sort of understanding that looking after Mother Earth is as critical as looking after each other is how we will then create a sustainable future.
Thank you, Helen. That's a absolutely beautiful artwork, and the story is wonderful, and acknowledging the beauty and the symbolism within that lovely artwork that you produced there. And I think it's a great way for us to start today's conversation. Some extra research that I did about NAIDOC Week, and some of the comments I read, it said country is inherent to our identity, and it sustains our lives in every aspect, spiritually, physically, emotionally, socially, and culturally. It's more than a place. Richard, I'll ask you, can you please share your thoughts on how the majority of us, as a multicultural nation of new Australians, I include myself in that, can come to understand those beliefs about country and how it's so important?
Thanks for the opportunity. I'm going to Wang in Nunuk. I'm very happy to speak to you all here. When you talk about country, it's really the essence of who we are as a people on this planet. We have processes of incorporating country into everything we do. You'd always find that when the modern conversation starts, it always starts about the person or the purpose, and that's a wonderful and noble thing. But the impact on place is very important, because place allows plants, animals, people to coexist. So place is very significant. So when we talk about Mother Earth, and we're talking about healing the country and healing the land, we're actually talking about a series of places that are interconnected. And once we understand that there are a series of places that are interconnected, and we see the whole Earth as a woven piece of fabric that's connecting all the elements that exists in that place. And Aboriginal people have always understood that. And Aboriginal people understood that outside of Earth, outside of human people, there is a greater power than all of us. We see that in spirit, but we also see it in the physical sense. And while the Western minds are conditioned to understand this greater power, it's taken for granted on a daily basis. And one of these greater powers I'm speaking about is the sun. So the sun allows this planet to exist how it is today. Take that one sun away and you've got a problem. So thousands of years ago, our people recognized that the sun was the giver of life. So the name of the sun in our culture is called Ngank. And Ngank is the giver of life. Ngank is also the word for our mother. So our mother and the sun are givers of life. Then the planet itself then becomes the Buddha, which is the fertility, the earth, the place that holds the seeds so the seeds can actually grow. So as you can see, this ancient philosophy is ingrained in our language. So when our mothers and grandmothers and our women are pregnant, it's called Bujari. It's from the land. And if you look at that ancient philosophy going back for thousands of years, it becomes ingrained into the process of moving forward and respecting everyone. And if it's intergenerational, it's intergenerationally ingrained to understand that we are a part of the tapestry and not the creators of the tapestry or the whole tapestry. And once we understand that, then we respect not only our fellow man, but we respect the animals and the plants and the place. So I firmly believe that we're at a time now where minds are starting to be open to look at other views. And if you're open to other views, then you could listen to other views. And when you listen to other views, you can absorb them. Then once you absorb them, you can analyze them. Then once you analyze them, you can respect them, you can adopt them, you can adapt them, you can compare them. But at least you've got something to talk about rather than being conditioned into saying, this is the only way. So when we start a conversation about healing Earth, we must really start of deconditioning our thinking of what we believe the Earth is and condition to say, what is the Earth doing for us and what's the Earth has given us? Sorry for the long-winded explanation.
I think that that's an awful lot to take in, and it's a lot for us to even begin to try and understand. But we appreciate the words that you've shared with us there, Richard, and I hope that we can all in some way take some of that knowledge and day by day, little piece by little piece, try and bring those beliefs and those traditions into our own lives. Helen, you spoke recently with the Honourable Kim Beazley, Governor of Western Australia, and he's our patron and a big supporter. We appreciate his support. You spoke to him about your experiences growing up, of your connection to country and everything associated with that, including your exposure to art, people, the land, the environment. And can you relate that to our theme today of this week of Heal Country, and then how we can all benefit from learning more about that deeper knowledge and understanding that you gained growing up?
Thanks, Anne-Marie, and thank you, Richard, for that really beautiful explanation. And that's exactly right. We are not the controllers of the earth at all, not in any way, shape or form. We are part of that rich tapestry, and that's the ecological framework in which we all form a very important and irreplaceable part, but we are not in control of it. So we have to play our part in looking after everything around us. I think the thing that I love about how I grew up was this appreciation that you are part of a much bigger cycle of life, and that life extends across nature, it extends across all of the animal groups and everything that is within our earth and our oceans and our skies. And so it's about that balance and having the respectful relationship across all of those different dimensions. And that balance is what keeps us healthy. I mean, there's a very, very good reason why Aboriginal people are the oldest continuous living culture. We sustained an abundant life in this landscape for many, many generations, many, many thousands of years. And that's because we understood that really important aspect of relationship as opposed to ownership. And when you're in relationship, it's then about a caring relationship that you have with everything around you. And so I grew up in a world that was a very animate world. Everything had spirit, everything had life, everything had purpose and place. And so you wouldn't disrespect it. And that included things like rocks and mountains and, everything else that in a Western sense wouldn't necessarily be seen as having life to it. But it all formed part of that ecosystem that was so important to then maintain that balance and that sustainability of life and good health and good well-being going forward. So growing up with a different sense of how everything was connected, that balance also between what knowledge and evidence is. So some Indigenous knowledge systems are based on thousands of years of observation and experiential learning, which is actually a very, very deep knowledge base. Whereas the way we look at evidence now is often a bit limited. And the way we even look at outcomes and things like that in some of the things that we do is also a bit limited. And it's not as broad a broader base as what we had from thousands of years of that observational and experiential learning. And through that, there's a wisdom that's been developed that's handed down through story, through ceremony, through culture. And it's interesting when you look back now at something like brain development, for example. It's really important that we establish good memory pathways very early on in a child's development. Well, being an oral culture, we did that. We did that through storytelling. Storytelling is the oldest form of learning that we have in the world. And through storytelling, you also learn in a different way. And you can learn about life and you can learn about rules and social relationships and emotional development and all of that sort of thing. So even our inherent practices in the way we taught our children from very early on were different, but they were actually very, very good and very, very effective. So laying down all of those intensive memory pathways early in life actually holds you in good stead when you're old, and allows you then to develop that well-being as you age, because you will remember all of the stories from your childhood. So I think that growing up in an Aboriginal world was a fantastic opportunity to be embedded within nature and to be embedded within an ecological framework that I think is good for all children. And so one of my goals, I think, is to make sure that we allow all Australian children to have that opportunity to be embedded within nature, to appreciate the relationships with everything that lives around them, and to be able to take up that role of custodianship as they grow up and become adults.
Thank you, Helen. That's really interesting, isn't it? Particularly when you talk there about the education of children and how we as a society look to other nations around the world to look for their expertise, and we've got such a lot here that we can call on without even thinking about going to those other countries and looking at marks and scoring and ATAR results and all those things. If we look back to those cultures and those ways of bringing up our children, we've got it all here, and to help us all be better citizens. So thanks. They were beautiful, beautiful words, and thanks. I'm seeing lots of comments coming in that are resonating with the words that you're saying, and that people are recognising some of those the comments that you're making in their own cultural beliefs, and it's lovely to see the support there. Richard, I'll ask you now, can you talk to us about something that you deal with every day, about how healing country means embracing First Nations cultural knowledge and understanding of country as part of Australia's national heritage? That the culture and values of Aboriginal peoples and Torres Strait Islanders are respected equally to as the cultures and values of all Australians.
Well, the uniqueness of place has always been a starting point. And the uniqueness of place gives you the uniqueness of plants and animals. And there's a system that operates, and they operate in tandem with each other. And what that actually does, it gives a balance, a beautiful balance to a place, a purpose, a people. And if you understand those balances, then you understand that every insect, plant, animal as a connect to a place. They don't exist without the leaves, the trees, the rocks that are the habitats, the foods, so all of these is starting from basics on a daily basis. And Indigenous people understand that because we take that into our totem systems, our respects of place. And that's handed down through stories and connects through stories. So what we find is that if you're willing to say that this tree is a cousin of mine, and this duck is a brother of mine, you've got to connect to nature so that doesn't separate us from nature, because we're all connected in that circle. So that balance has taken millions of years to evolve. And if you've got a slow evolution, it sets up this wonderful balance of all the levels. And you always find, and I always find, that the last comers to every place, plant, animal, the last comers are the most destructive, because they don't understand the balance of what's been there for a long, long time. So they bring their values or their balance or their impositions into a whole new ecosystem and try to make the ecosystem adopt to them, rather than saying, I'm going to sit down and listen. So if it's a person, a plant or an animal, it makes no difference. You always find that the last one that comes is destructive to those who have been there for a long, long time. And we have many examples here with feral animals, exotic plants that were brought in. We won't go into the people because that's under the words of colonisation. But you'd find a lot of these times colonisation, the exotic plants or the exotic animals, they don't come quietly and they don't stay and listen and try to absorb first. They come with a loud bang, and they come with ignorance and arrogance and self-importance, saying, I've got a better way because I'm not willing to sit down for a long time and listen to how this evolved. Not only over 1,000 of years, but let's just take the last 200 years. Let's just take the last 500 years and make the comparison to where you come from and what your historical facts were. You'd find that you landed in a place here in Australia where there was no organised warfare that took place. There was no mass destruction of plant or animal. There was that collectiveness of coexistence. And people called it primitive. They called us actually nomadic. But understanding it's very systematic. And it's what everyone is aiming for now. So, again, I don't want to be too philosophical because it's subjects that we're trying to cover thousands of years of knowledge that I've been privy to and just a small part of. And we're trying to analyse it, absorb it, share it, so that other people can absorb, analyse and share in a 1 hour period. Impossible, but we can take these moments to stimulate conversation, prick the consciousness, and again, like I always say in my conversations, appeal to common sense and common decency.
Thanks, Richard. It's a shame that common sense is not always that common. We'd like it to be, but it's all wonderful, wonderful ways. We've got a few questions that are starting to come in from our online audience, and one that, and I encourage you to send those questions through. And one that I've got here is, and excuse me, glasses on and off, depends on which screen I'm looking at. I'm sure there's a few can relate to that. And Charlotte's asked, how do we recondition ourselves and be more connected to country in our own busy city lives? I don't mind who answers that. Helen, would you want to give that a first go?
Okay. Look, I think that when we reflect on history, and Richard's exactly right in what he's talking about in terms of there was no warfare here. The concept of genocide actually didn't exist in Aboriginal culture. The idea that you would completely wipe out a group to steal their land was a totally foreign concept and not something that was part of our belief system. So there were a lot of introduced concepts that came through that process. And he was right as well. We had this abundant life in Australia at that time as well. And yet in the last, couple of hundred years, we've seen a lot of destruction and a lot of, species becoming extinct and all the rest of it. And I wonder whether it comes down to this difference in philosophy about whether everything is here for you to use, and once it's finished, you go and find something else or a substitute. And that seems to be how this kind of consumerism gets hold, is that, we use up all of the resources that we can until there's none left, and then we move on to something else. Instead of thinking, we had abundance of life here. So there was always going to be enough. But how do we get that thinking shifting so that we look after it, so that there always is enough, as opposed to taking what is there and thinking that that is ours to use and destroy as we want to? So I think that we can't go back. We're here now. But how do we incorporate different understanding of conservation? How do we understand how we use our natural resources in a way that is sustainable? I mean, everyone's talking about sustainability now, but they don't necessarily always look back on Indigenous knowledge to understand what sustainability truly represents. And I think that's where we need the biggest shift. And certainly in our everyday lives, we can look at this. For example, just even in my own little sanctuary that I've created here, by the way, this backdrop is a photograph of my garden out the back. And I love the fact that within my own little backyard, I've tried to create an ecosystem that's friendly to whatever plants, animals, creatures want to come and live here. And so I think that if all of us can kind of do this, and then on a much larger scale, we can do it within our broader communities and think about how we make room for everybody and everything to live alongside in a good way, is a shift in the attitude. Over to you, Richard.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. I was going to pass across to Richard and to get your views as well.
Rather than repeat yourself, go to many questions we can. I think, Ellen and I are going to be nodding and saying, I agree and I agree and we agree. So, because we're coming from the same intergenerational foundation and basis, which not only us, but you find that lots of other people will agree out there as well. One of the things that, and we would say, and we say this right, I should have said it right from the outset, we are not the authorities or the knowledge holders or the keepers of culture. We're only a part of it. If you want to, you've got to talk to many different other Aboriginal people and other Indigenous peoples and other knowledge peoples to understand that the secret in our success and our knowledge was in our shared process, so that some person to have the knowledge of a certain amount of plants and trees, then you've got another group that's got another knowledge about the birds and the place. So there was a whole shared knowledge systems. We called it under our totems, or the Burunga systems. And what that actually made, it made every person an authority to their connect, and they'll connect to those with more knowledge than they and learn and share that. But that was the difference within the culture. So no one becomes the ultimate authority on culture or nature. So I believe that's the beauty. And about about being in a city. City is a place. It's a place. So Perth, if you have a look at it, may be full of buildings. It's full of busy life, cars, etc. But it's built on a ridge. That ridge line running from Kings Park down to Murray is a part of a dreaming story. It's built on swamps. It's built around the river. Those stories are still there. There's an imposition on them, but they're still there and they're alive. And if you're open to listen and look for them, you will see and absorb and feel those.
Helen, I've got a question for you, and that's from myself and others that I've spoken to, but mainly from me. And that is that you were from Pilbara country, and then you come now and you live here in Whadjuk country, and those customs and those the change in that environment from, it's very different country to each other. What did you have to go through in changing in your place of where you live and coming into those different cultures? Because there's cultures within cultures. Like Richard said, we're not the owners of one thing. Everybody's got a part in it. So what were your experiences?
Yeah, so I think that we have to understand, if anyone knows the Aboriginal map of Australia, it's very, very different looking map than what we currently see with the states and territories. And so we had something like 250 distinct nations and over 700 dialects. So it would be, it looks more like a map of Europe than a traditional map of Australia. And so each of those groups, as Richard has rightly said, had their own knowledge bases and their own knowledge systems, but it was a shared knowledge system. So you shared within the groups around you, and then in the broader space, there were dreaming stories and song lines that went through the whole country, that shared different aspects of knowledge and understanding of life and connection. And it's that interconnected nature of the different groups that actually made it strong and made it work, as opposed to them being so distinctly different that they didn't connect. In actual fact, they're connected through various different aspects of culture right across the board. So from my experience, I didn't grow up in country because of obviously the impact of colonisation, and my grandmother was removed down to Perth, and so that's where my family ended up growing up. But one of the most extraordinary experiences I had as a young woman was actually going back to country and going back to where all my ancestors had been for some many 100,000 years, or really, as they would say, from the beginning of time. And when you go back and you stand there on your grandmother's country and you feel the sense of deep connection, that you feel like you've been there forever, it's a really overwhelming experience to describe. But it's a wonderful renewal of spirit. And that's why people are connected to parts of country for that reason. That's your place. And as Richard said, place is very important. So no one else's place is as important as your own. And so when you go back to the country and the land, and you stand on the land of your ancestors and you stand in your grandmother's footprints, you're instantly connected to thousands and thousands and thousands of years of history and wisdom. And it's a wonderful feeling. And it's really, as I said, it gives you a sense of renewal. So you do have to keep going back to country. Obviously, I live off country, but when you do go back, every time you go back, you get that sense of renewal. So it's inexplicably linked to our well-being. You have to be able to go back and reconnect for that purpose.
There we go. Well, thank you. Thanks for that. It's something that we will all try and take that in. And for those of us who come from other countries, I'm sure we can relate to that in some small way. And we're all trying to find our own piece of country here in Australia. And maybe some of this messaging that we're hearing today is going to help us along that track. I've got a question here for you, Richard, and I don't think that we could have a session, a conversation without a question about this topic for you. Mick, this was provided beforehand, and Mick from the Department of Home Affairs, actually, he's seen you deliver many welcomes to country ceremonies over the years, and mentioned one in particular at a Fremantle Dockers function, which he remembers as particularly mesmerising, and I hope they won that day. And in going back to your very first welcome to country, how much has it changed since then? And have you been consulted with and part of the development of those welcomes over the years, and to help it become such an integral part of our nation and our country today?
Oh, big question. The forward to the conversation, of course, is that the welcomes have been here for thousands of years, and it's been been activated by our people for thousands of years, and it was bringing you into a place of cultural, spiritual social, emotional safety. And there's only two reasons you go to someone else's country. That's for good or for bad. So when we say Maman Jinong Nunok Nunajinning Ngaramur Buddha, we're saying may the good spirit watch over you when you're here in our country. It's the same as if you look at the other way, it's a blessing, say you're going to be safe here. But if you look at it the other way as well, through the, say that another religious system says God is watching you and watching every move. If you make a mistake, it's a sin. If you make big mistakes, it's a big sin. So it's calling out on those people who are tapped to spirituality, and everyone in the earlier pre-connection, we tapped into their own spirituality and connect to their country. So they'd go with respect to someone else's country because they knew if you did something wrong, it not only affected you, it affected your people, your place, your connections. So it wasn't a burden to carry all this. It was an honor to be connected to. So rather than the fear factor, you look at the honor factor and say, I have a responsibility and a connection and a belonging, and I respect that. So when you go into someone else's country, you bring all that respect with you. So when we did the welcome back in 1976, that was recorded as one of the first ones that was had. But that was just the first one in a sort of public arena. It wasn't the first one. We've been doing it as Aboriginal people, as I say, for thousands of years. But that was because of two other cultures, the Maoris and Cook Islanders. They had the same spiritual connect to their country, and they could not perform in someone else's country unless they were welcome. So they asked me to do a welcome to them in public, on the stage, so that people can see that they were clear to perform their cultural presentations and their cultural dances. So what people see as the arts or dance or music or art in a Western sense, we have that as a cultural expression. It's an expression of who we are through a form. So that's sort of the background there. So it came from a cultural respect and a cultural connect from a people who understood what a welcome and a blessing is from another country. Then the observation by people like the tourist commissions, events organisations, saw the power of this welcome and thought this is a wonderful thing to use as a tool and show the difference of who we are and where we are. So I believe, to me, during the Choggum presentation, I say this quite a bit, that during the Choggum presentation, I was able to stand on the stage at the old Esplanade. Behind me was the Queen, the Prime Minister, the Premier, and the Lord Mayor of Perth, all on the same stage. I was able to stand in front of them and say, Maman Jinong Nunok Nunok Jinong Ngaramut Buja Wajak Buja, Dabakan Janakoling Kaiwa. I was able to say to them, you're in the land of our people, the Wajak people. The good spirit is watching over you, walk softly. And I believe that the language and the land is still here, and that respect has grown. Now, once we've done it a couple of times, of course, all the other nations around Australia tapped straight into it because it was in everyone did it, but it wasn't accepted into the public arena at that stage until the major events started to see that this is something that is paying respect to people, place, and the plants and animals of that land. And it slowly evolved then. If you own something, or as Helen and I started off, we don't own anything. We're only a part of the story and the link in the chain, and we pass that on. So whether it's myself or someone else, it made no difference. It was the ancestors saying, this place, when you're walking softly in the country, when you're walking softly in the country, you're learning about the country. you have a responsibility then for those who can't speak to speak for them, and that's mostly plants and animals. So I very rarely speak for people because people have the capacity to speak for themselves, and they exercise that quite well. But those who can't speak for themselves, the place, the plants, the animals, that's our obligations. And when we do the Welcome to Countries, we're also telling people to be careful about those and respect them as well.
Thank you, Richard. I've got a question. I'll put this one to you. This one's come in while we've been talking here online from Kit, and it's a good question. Kit's curious, how we heal country from, and excuse me for reading, how do we heal country from the intergenerational trauma that's happened here in WA and in other countries, acknowledging the perspective that colonisation involved convicts being sent to Australia for many reasons, many including stories of poverty, stolen land and genocide where they were born. Intergenerational trauma has happened, sadly, but intergenerational healing is possible. And how can, like Helen, could you have a go at answering Kit's query there?
Have you got all day?
Yeah.
Look, it's a really big question, and I think that my approach to this is to say that while we've had a lot of progress and we've made a lot of great strides, and that's a fantastic thing, we still have a really long way to go. I don't believe that as a nation we've really understood the magnitude of what happened. We talk about intergenerational trauma when what we're really talking about is healing from genocide in this country, and that puts a whole different spin on it. And so if you understand magnitude, then you can start to think about what might be required for recovery, not only of its people but also of the landscape and what we've done to the country. And I think that what we also fail to recognise is that for the people who obviously came here at the very beginning of colonisation and that process of genocide, and then the systems that we've developed from that, so our health systems, our mental health systems, still take a predominantly Western approach to science and to recovery and treatment, and yet that comes from the very origins of what caused the destruction in the first place. So one of the things we have to think about is let's flip that around and say, well, Indigenous people were here since forever. Maybe they've actually got a better way of understanding intergenerational healing than the current models that actually caused a lot of the difficulties that we had. For example, if you look at our mental health system, we have huge exclusion criteria. It's very hard to get into. You only get into it if you're really desperate. Whereas if we look at our traditional healing models, for example, they are inclusive. Everybody is welcome. There is no exclusion criteria, and they work in a very, very holistic and broad-based way. And each individual has their own unique healing journey. So I think that if we're going to move forward in a really clear way around intergenerational trauma, then we shouldn't just be looking to Western science. We should actually be looking to Indigenous ways of healing as well, because there's an enormous amount there that is of great value and has held us in good stead. If you think about how we were as peoples at the time of colonisation, we were healthier than most Europeans. So we must have done some pretty good stuff, and we must have had very good traditional models of care that held us both in a physical sense, in an emotional and psychological sense, in a social, spiritual and cultural sense that contributed to our well-being. And that's what we should be looking towards, to look at some of this journey out of the darkness where we currently are.
Thank you, Helen. I've got a couple of questions here, and I'm going to combine them. We've got, because I'm mindful of the time, we have to be finishing soon. And I'm aware that we've got a wide range of people on here today from many organisations, and there's quite a few on here as well from local government. And what can they do to help share these stories and experiences with their own communities? But then further on from that, a question that we've received on here says that many people don't know First Nations people, and so they get access to information from their workplaces or from those local councils or places that, that particularly workplaces, to find out some information. What's available for face-to-face connections for people who are unsure but want to start exploring and listening to the First Nations, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people? So what can organisations do, and what can we do as individuals? I think that's going to have to be our last question then for the day, so go for it.
Well, one of the first things I believe is that we as a people, and most Indigenous peoples around the world that have been settled for a long time in their areas and their regions, had a wonderful prevention system. So if you've got a system of prevention, then you don't have to worry about the healing, because you've actually prevented it from actually occurring. I mentioned at one stage that we were the forerunners in genetics. That was one of the greatest prevention systems that we had. That system of intermarriage, that you can't marry from a certain bloodline, and just in the Nyunga one, if you follow that system and those patterns, it takes you 6 generations before you marry back into your family structure. 6 generations. So you can imagine how pure that bloodline is. So that's science and genetics. You know the problem if you intermarry pretty close. You know if you mix the blood up or the blood's not right. That's what a lot of science and medicines are looking at today. So that prevention system, that well-being of being mind, body, spirit, being connected to place and land, it's all in the knowledge. And it's what you'd always find is that the trying to transfer one knowledge system to another place sometimes just doesn't work. It doesn't work because there's no triggers that are around there. There is none of the the Sea of Galilee or the Mount Sinai, or this is the Himalayas where the meditations take place. You can't recreate that here. So how do you tap into the local spirituality, but understanding that there's a universal connect? And that's where I started my conversation right from the start. My boss is my mother, it's the sun, the one giver of life, the same name.
Thank you very much. We've got so many comments coming in on there, and I think we're just about out of time. So I'm just going to wrap this up now. Thank you both so much for your time, and let everybody know that this has been recorded. And so we'll share that with everybody today, and we'll put it on a YouTube channel and send you links to find and revisit this and share this with your community, with your family, with your as many people as you can find to listen to these wonderful stories.
If I could just make a final comment, Anne-Marie. I just wanted to say that we have the oldest, most wise knowledge system in the entire world, and that combined with the new knowledge system we have and the technology that we've created over time, we should be the world leaders in everything. What a great opportunity we have in Australia. We can just forge ahead with all of that at our fingertips.
Absolutely, and I think we just have to maybe all open our ears a little bit, open our eyes a lot more, and take that on board. So thanks, Helen. That's really poignant. We'll just wrap this up now, saying that this Online Leaders is just one of the many initiatives that our small team curates and delivers each year. And the COVID restrictions that have helped us with this, they brought this as an opportunity to us rather than something that we couldn't do. We found a way that we could do. And so I think that all of us have changed the way that we work a little bit. So thanks to that we can deliver these Lunch for Leaders sessions. And we do have another one coming up in September, so watch out for that. We also work with individual schools and local communities to promote inclusion, social cohesion and leadership in civic citizenship through our capacity building training and workshops. So check in with us, check on our website and have a look at that. Follow us on social media, and we share wonderful stories of the wonderful people that we deal with, people like Richard and Helen and other awardees and Australian of the Year and Citizen of the Year alumni. So have a look on our website for that suite of programs, and reach out if you'd like to host a workshop or do some training with your teams or community. And we encourage you to look around your networks and identify those who inspire you through the work they do or the causes they champion, and nominate them for the 2022 Australian of the Year Awards. Nominations are now open, and it's super easy online at australianoftheyear.org.au. Keep an eye open for the future Lunch with Leaders in September, and we hope you can join us for that. And just in closing, I'd like to extend a huge thank you to Professor Helen Milroy and Dr. Richard Walley for not only your passion, but your unwavering sense of purpose. We certainly look forward to hearing from you throughout the rest of your year as WA's 2021 Australian and Senior Australian of the Year. And thank you to our audience for joining us online today. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great afternoon.
Do you want to know what makes an Australian of the Year?
Just look around.
It's people who show courage,
sacrifice
and kindness.
Now's the time to reflect
on your community
and who you admire.
Now's the time to respect by nominating and acknowledging them.
Now's the time to celebrate
their story,
their contribution
and their generosity.
And now's the time to nominate.
At AustralianoftheYear.org.au